Opinion polls now show it to be the nation's #1 concern, a concern echoed by government when the President's Commission on Drug Abuse took the extraordinary step of asking all U.S. companies to test their employees for drug use. The concern seems more than justified. Although it's not known exactly how pervasive illegal drug use is, it is clear that in the past decade it has escalated at an alarming rate. In 1985, major U.S. cities reported 1,263 heroin deaths, compared to a little over 400 in 1979. And in the state of Florida, arrests for cocaine possession increased 80% last year alone. This year, more than $110 billion will exchange hands in narcotics transactions. And drugs are no longer limited to certain socioeconomic groups. Statistics show that more than 80% of all Americans will try illegal drugs by the time they turn 25. Like many of the millions of Americans who have tried illegal drugs, Stanice Grandy never thought it would lead to a serious addiction. But what started with an occasional joint became a dependency on hard drugs that cost her everything: her job, her family, and her self-respect.
I didn't plan to be an addict, and I never thought I could be that bad, that it could get that bad for me. I thought that with my upbringing and the environment I came from, it would make me exempt from the horrors that I later saw, but it didn't. I was selling my body. I was injecting drugs like in my neck and hands, anywhere. I couldn't keep a job. I was living in this apartment, and I was like $3,000, $4,000 behind in rent. I was living on the floor, on a mattress. I didn't have any friends.
Ultimately, Stanice found herself on the streets in a lifestyle of drugs and prostitution that left her feeling worthless and alone.
I felt so empty, and I didn't know what to do. I thought I was going to die like that. All the places I said I wouldn't go, I ended up being in, what they call oil joints, where people just go to shoot up with blood on the walls, and, people with abscesses. And I used to wonder, how did I get here? What did I do?
And things only got worse. Stanice was arrested for attempted robbery when she tried to get money from someone she had sold drugs to. When Stanice found herself in jail, she knew she had hit rock bottom.
And when I was in that jail cell with 3 women, and it was like a cell made for one, and I was laying on the floor in the urine, and I actually envied the roaches. Because they were able to go in and out the bars, and I wasn't. And it was at that point I prayed, what is the answer? What do I do now?
Stanice was released on probation, and she moved in with a man who she knew would support her drug habit. While there, she began watching the 700 Club, and one day she saw something on the show that would change her life forever.
This particular day, I don't know, I was just at my lowest, and I was crying and I was watching, and all of a sudden it was this guy that was on the screen, and I could really identify with him. And then when it went to the point where he went over to a window or something, and he was getting ready to shoot drugs, and at that point it wasn't him anymore. Some kind of way it had taken my form. I saw me.
And as Stanice listened to the man talk, she began to realize that he had something that she desperately wanted.
He had a certain peace or something, that I always wanted. And I was just into it then. I was like, what did you do? If you were there where I am now, what did you do? And he talked about asking Jesus to come into his life, just Jesus, live your life through me. And at that point, I was willing to try anything. I still didn't know how or what, but I just knew that's all I could do. I didn't know what else to do, and I kind of like gave it up at that point. I put it in this Jesus' hands.
Stanice's encounter with Jesus Christ that day gave her the strength she needed to break a 20-year addiction to drugs, and it gave her the desire to find a way out of her life of prostitution.
And I knew I had to do something, and it was, at this point I didn't have any food. I didn't know where my next meal was coming from. My old habits was to call one of my old tricks, but they told me I couldn't do it that way again, and I believed that at that point that God didn't want me to do that. At this point it was enough miracles that had happened in my life that I knew that if I just had faith and hold on, that things would change.
Stanice began calling the 700 Club counseling line for prayer, and slowly things did begin to change. After calling CBN's Operation Blessing, Stanice was able to leave the man she was living with, and she began building a new life of her own.
And do you know, I called him at like 3:30 or something like that in the afternoon. The lady, she said she'd check out my story or whatever. She called me back at like 20 after 4 and told me the check was in the mail. You know, and it was like, what? You know. And so once again, 700 Club was playing a part in my life. And when I called them and told them, you know, I didn't even have a bed to sleep on or whatever, they gave me numbers of people to call, people who had an abundance or for whatever reason had things to give other people like me.
And shortly after joining the 700 Club during a telethon, Stanice received a job as a secretary. She now has a home, a job, and self-respect.
It's humble. It's not much in here. It's not a lot of, you know, fancy things and everything. But everything in here are gifts of love. Everything in here I've worked to get. I didn't sell my body to get. God has given me a way to get everything in here.
Today, Stanice divides her time between work, helping other drug addicts, and spending time with her son that she has never been able to care for because of her addiction. It's a new life based on a new love, Jesus Christ.
He's just been so good to me. You know, and no, I wasn't worthy. I'm not worthy now. I am still a sinner, you know, but I ask for his forgiveness and he gives it to me anyway. You know, he loves me.